Let's just start introducing our first talk of the day. So first, we're going to start with Shawn Fair, from the Chief Executive Officer of Fair Consulting. He, with his team, has been changing the lives of many leaders around the world, including talks like this. And also, he's the mastermind behind and the founder of the Leadership Experience platform, where he's bringing even more experienced leaders to share their stories and best practices and learnings with a lot of people, as many people as he can and his team can. So today he's going to be talking about what does experience and effective leadership is, and how can it be the antidote of the corporate dysfunction. So welcome, Shawn.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, or maybe even good afternoon, depending on where you're located. Well, let me just start off by saying that the antidote to corporate dysfunction is great leadership. That's a fact. In order to expand the capacity of your organization, you have to expand the capacity of the people. In order to expand the capacity of the people, you have to expand the capacity of the leaders in the organization. Think about this. When we were in preschool, we had a curriculum. When we were in grade school, we had a curriculum. When we went to high school, we had a curriculum. When we went to college, we also had a curriculum. And when we graduated school, there was no more curriculum. As leaders, we are responsible for developing our own curriculum to expand our capacity. Because without expanding our own capacity, there is no way for us to expand the capacity of others. You know, a lot of leadership experts, they'll talk about the numbers and the productivity and the revenue loss and all those different things. And I believe in those things too. But I also believe in the eye test. If you want to solve the dysfunction in corporate America or in corporations today, you have to fix leadership. To see how the leader is doing, all you have to do is look at the people. Let me say it a different way. The signs of outstanding leadership appears primarily among the followers. Let me say it one other way. If your people are not doing their job, that means that you are not doing your job. So the way that you go about leading yourself has a lot to do with how your people lead themselves. Leadership is influence, and we all have to demonstrate the right attributes in order to get the right responses and reactions from our people. Here are 3 questions that you have to ask yourself. Are your people following? Are your people growing? And are your people changing? Those are 3 questions that you have to ask yourself to understand if your people are going in the right direction. If the answer to those questions are no, no, and no, then you have to ask these questions. Are your people trained? Are your people coached? Are your people being held accountable? And are your folks being motivated? All 4 of these are growth building tools. As a matter of fact, if your folks are not being trained, there's an undercurrent that happens within the organization because of it. If your folks are not being coached, there's an undercurrent that happens because of it. If you're not holding your people accountable, there is an undercurrent that happens because of it. And lastly, if they're not motivated, there is an undercurrent that happens because of it. Now, guys, I don't have time to give you a story about each one of these, but I am going to talk about the undercurrent that happens when you are not training your people on a consistent basis. And yeah, this is an over-exaggerated scenario, but it's a very true scenario. Back in 2001 and 2006, I used to be the vice president of training for the largest T-Mobile dealer in the US. It was a huge company. It had 435 locations across the country. And we had these kiosks in malls, these wireless kiosks where the kids would try to pull you over to sell you a free phone. That was kind of the thing back in those days. So let me just give you the backdrop of this. These kids were on average about 18 years of age. They were making about $60,000 a year. No one knew how much money they were really making. The guys that were managing the stores, these guys were right around 19 years old, and they were making about $100,000 a year. The guys that were running 3 of the locations on average was about 21 years old, and they were making about $250,000 a year. And the guys that would oversee the entire market, which was about 13 to 14 locations, they were averaging about $300,000 a year. And all I'm trying to say, there was a bunch of young kids making a lot of money. And when the company brought me on board, they said, Shawn, we want you to do a few things. We want you to bring a uniform training plan into our organization, and we want you to bring professionalism into our organization. Well, you guys are probably wondering what I'm talking about. Well, we would have a 3-day conference, and we would fly all of the regional and market director guys for a 3-day conference at a hotel. And then the first day, we would get kicked out of the hotel because these guys are on the balcony dropping beer bottles trying to hit folks as they were walking along on the sidewalk. This is what we had to deal with. So my job was to bring professionalism into the organization. Now, when I started, we were right in the middle of another growth spurt. Guys, I had 125 trainers that were on my team. I had 2 graphic designers, 2 content developers, and I had 4 national trainers, and I had to hire a 5th national trainer. I'll never forget him. His name was Mr. Phil Black. And when Phil Black came on board, I said, Phil, we're supposed to have new hire training in week 1. But because of my travel schedule, I'm not going to be able to get to San Diego to do the training. So you're going to have training in week 3. But in the meantime, I want you to go to Seattle and work with the market director out there. His name is Rob Ford, and he's going to help set the foundation for you so that when you come to training, you will understand the lingo. See, he wasn't from the industry. And then in week 2, I want you to go out to Chicago and work with Rich Swice. He's the market director out there. He's going to also help set the foundation for you. That way, when you come to new hire training, you'll understand the lingo. Guys, I just want you to know that was a lie. I just didn't feel like going out to San Diego to do the training. My travel schedule was just fine. I just didn't feel like it. But in week 2, guys, I was on the phone with one of my other national trainers. Her name was Laura Malwitz. I used to enjoy having conversations with Laura. I would demonstrate what we call free reign leadership. In other words, I would give her autonomy to travel where she wanted, to train what she wanted. All she had to do was just tell me what it was that she wanted to do. And I enjoyed that conversation. But while I was having that conversation on this particular day in week 2, I get a phone call from Mr. Phil Black. But guys, I didn't answer the phone because the experts say that every time that you're having a conversation with your employee, you're supposed to give them your undivided attention. So I didn't answer the phone. So we're back having our conversation and we're having a great time. And the next thing you know, Phil Black is giving me another call 10 seconds later. But I didn't answer the phone because the experts say that anytime that you're having a one-on-one conversation with your people, you're supposed to give them your undivided attention. I didn't answer the phone. And then 10 seconds later, guess who's calling me? It's Mr. Phil Black. Now, guys, that's what I call unusual behavior. Something's wrong. Now, I still didn't answer the phone, but I says, Laura, can you do me a favor? And guys, this was just a hunch. Do you mind going over to your computer and see if Coporate has sent something out that may confuse someone who's new in the organization? I'm just thinking that maybe Phil had a question. So she says, Shawn, that's not a problem. So she goes over to her computer, she takes her time, and when she comes back, she's cracking up. And this is a very true story, by the way. I says, Laura, what's so funny? I would like to laugh too. She says, well, Shawn, there's a picture of Phil Black in my email. No, there's a picture of Phil Black in everybody's email. It went across the company's distribution list. Well, I said, Laura, there's nothing wrong with the picture. What kind of picture is it? Well, Shawn, he doesn't have a lot of clothes on. Well, Laura, when you say that he doesn't have a lot of clothes on, you mean like he's got on some basketball shorts, a tank top or something along those lines? She goes, no, I mean, he's about naked in his picture. Guys, now I know why Mr. Phil Black has been calling me. I says, Laura, can I call you back? She says, Shawn, go take care of your business. Now, I want you guys to know that this is a high conflict situation. I need to get myself together. The experts say that anytime that you're dealing with a situation like this one, you have to have a conversation with the right mentality. And the right mentality is, maintain the relationship. So no matter how upset you may be, you must maintain the relationship. So I called Phil up and I was real nice. Hey, Phil, I noticed that you called me a few times. I was just wondering, how may I help you? And you can hear the tremble in Phil's voice. Hey, Shawn, man, I just want to apologize to you up front, man. I'm just so embarrassed right now. And I stopped him. I says, Phil, listen, we all make mistakes. Well, what happened? Now, you guys understand, I know exactly what's going on. He says, well, Shawn, I was sending a picture to my girlfriend. I stopped him. Now, Phil, when you sent this picture to your girlfriend, did you send it through your personal email or the company email? He says, well, I sent it through the company email. Well, I said, well, Phil, you shouldn't have done anything like that, but that's okay. What kind of picture was it? Well, Shawn, it's her birthday and it was meant to be a sexy kind of picture. I stopped him. Now, Phil, when you say sexy, how sexy of a picture we talking? And then he said the same thing that Laura said. Well, Shawn, I didn't have a bunch of clothes on. I stopped him. I said, you had on some basketball shorts, a tank top or something along them lines. He goes, no, Shawn, that's not quite what I had on. And I drugged this out. I made this real painful for Phil. And he finally said it. He said, Shawn, I really didn't have any clothes on. I said, Phil, can I call you back? Because my emotions were starting to rise up. So I had two things to do. First, I needed to calm down. The experts say that anytime that you're dealing with a conflict like this one, where your emotions start to rise up, there's a few things that you could do. They say if you take a couple deep breaths, it's supposed to calm you down. Well, that didn't work for me. That may work for you. They say if you change your position in your chair, it's supposed to give you a different outlook of the circumstance. Well, that didn't work for me. That may work for you. They say that if you just take a cold sip of water, it's supposed to cool you off. That didn't work for me either. The only thing that worked for me was to remove myself from the situation temporarily. Now, obviously, I need to call HR, but I says I'm not going to do that. I'm going to call my executive VP. His name is Mike Gormley, and he was 25 years old at the time. I was 36, and I was considered to be one of the grandfathers of the company. I says, Mike, how do you want to handle this situation? He says, well, Shawn, what happened? I says, I don't know. I was so frustrated, I had to get off the phone before finding out. And this was their company, by the way. This was a dealer and not corporate. If this was corporate, Phil would have got fired, I would have got fired, and Mike would have got fired too. He says, Shawn, whatever Phil did, just tell him, don't do it again. It was just that simple for Mike. I said, Mike, I can handle that. So I get off the phone with Mike. I get myself together and I call Phil Black back, and I'm very calm. I says, Phil, hello, how are you doing? He says, Shawn, I'm not doing so well. I says, well, I got great news for you. I says, you got a job. And I got my job. I just need to know what happened. Now, remember, this is right around 2001 timeframe. He says, Shawn, I believe someone broke into my email, went into my sent folder. They found the picture. And as a company practical joke, they sent it through the distribution list. I says, Phil, that makes perfectly good sense. Well, what's the solution to this? He says, I'm going to change my password. And he did just that, or at least I thought. That was the end of our conversation. I didn't chastise Phil or discipline Phil. He was new. He was a good kid. 3 days later, Phil calls me back with the same tremble in his voice. I said, Phil, what is it? He said, Shawn, man, they changed my signature on my email. And I didn't realize it. Well, did you change your password, Phil? He says, I just changed it. See, what was common sense for me wasn't common sense for him. I never followed up with him to see if he actually made the change. I said, well, Phil, what does your signature say? Well, it's supposed to say Phil Black, National Sales Trainer. Now it says Phil Black, National Sex Trainer, and the sex was highlighted in red. And he was sending emails to Motorola, Samsung, all of our vendors. This was the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me in my work history. The point of my story is this. There is an undercurrent when people are not being trained or you are training untimely. See, new hire training was supposed to happen in week 1. And guess what we cover in the first day of training? We cover email ethics. And we have everyone change their password. In that situation, the undercurrent due to untimely training it surfaced right away in a major way. Sometimes the undercurrent from lack of training may not show up for 3 months, 6 months, or even 2 years. An undercurrent can be damaged reputation, lost revenue. It can also be death, depending on what industry that you're in. So when you think about these undercurrents, if you're not training your people and you're not coaching your people and you're not holding them accountable, or they're not motivated, there are undercurrents that will cause dysfunction within your team environment. That's a fact. Great leaders grow their people 1% better every single day. And it comes through these 4 avenues. And if you're growing your people 1% better every single day, it means that 100 days from now, they're 100% better. You don't even recognize them. But if these 4 components are missing from your daily activities, it will cause dysfunction within your environment. Guys, it is important to understand that 50 to 70% of the revenue that corporations generate typically goes towards people's salary. Less than 1% of the company's budget is used towards training people. That's a travesty. That's a travesty. So when training is not happening, when coaching is not happening, when accountability is not happening, and when folks are not being motivated, managers allow their people to seep into different zones. And the first zone that I'm going to talk about is called the dead zone. In the dead zone, here are some of the characteristics that you see from your people. These people that are on your team, they have no interest in improving. They take no initiative to get better. They don't see things that make them change. Typically, they are people to whom things happen. In other words, their alarm clock didn't go off. That's why I was late for work. I didn't have that project in my calendar. That's why I never got started, and that's why it's not finished. They always have an excuse. They retired years ago, but they're still at work. They're at work. They ain't working. They reside to things as they are, as they were, and not where they are. In other words, you gave them an award 3 years ago. They're still talking about the same award that you gave them 3 years ago. They have lack of interest in the company's future, and they seek confirmation from the past versus the present. How many of you that are listening to this call right now, you have someone like this on your team? This person that we allow to get into this zone is a very negative person that's on the team. And negativity breeds negativity. That's a fact. I got some news for you. They did not come in this way, and you did not hire them this way. You allowed them to get this way due to lack of training, lack of coaching, lack of accountability, and lack of motivation. Guys, let me also say that these people, they have grown to develop poor work ethic. That's a fact. And it makes this person very dangerous on your team. Let me give you an example. When you have someone that has poor work ethic, that means that they're not doing their job in totality in most cases, which means that other people on the team have to pull a little bit more weight. And that more weight that other people are pulling, who's doing a pretty decent job, can become a negative consequence to those individuals. A negative consequence changes one's existing behavior. So typically we implement or we insert a negative consequence when an employee is not doing their job. And when you implement a negative consequence, it changes their poor behavior, typically to good behavior. But when someone is doing a good job and there's an unintentional negative consequence, it will change their behavior, which is good behavior, to poor behavior. That's what a negative consequence does. Let me give you an example. I have 2 employees who work from 9 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. 2. One does more work, which means they're working more hours, which means they're getting less pay. The other employee is working from 9 to 5, but they're doing less work, which means they're working less hours, which means they're getting more pay. So technically, you are giving the person who's doing less work a positive consequence, which is encouraging them to do less work. And the person who is doing more work is getting a negative consequence, which is going to encourage them to do less work. So we have to be very careful about these people. Here's my question. Can you save these people in the dead zone? I want you guys to know that everybody is savable, but they have to want to be saved. And this person in the dead zone, they don't want to be saved. And they do need to be removed from the organization. There is no way for you to be an effective coach for your other employees or to motivate your other employees or even to hold them accountable if this person who's been in the organization for the past 18 months with a poor attitude, underperforming, it undercuts your ability to lead. Even though you are responsible for putting them there, you have to remove them from the team environment. Guys, that's zone number 1. Zone number 2 is very short. It's called the comfort zone. In this zone, your people, they want to be effective. They've been successful in the past. They want to continue being successful. They continue to do the same old things that worked before. What's their problem? They struggle with adapting to change. And primarily because of lack of knowledge, you have this particular issue. This is a training issue. This person wastes a lot of time in the workplace. A person who lacks knowledge is the biggest time waster of all time. That's a fact. Can you save this person? The answer is simply yes. Putting in the right training and making sure that you have a consistent coaching program is the antidote that's necessary to solve this particular issue over a stretch period of time. You can save these people. Let's go to zone number 3. It's called the panic zone. I guess the big question I have for you is this. Is it okay to squeeze or to apply pressure to your people? Is it okay to do that? Guys, there's nothing wrong with applying pressure. When you apply pressure to your people, they move a little bit faster, don't they? You get more productivity. There are certain times of the year where you need more productivity. You need to get more things done in a rapid period of time. That's a fact. There's nothing wrong with pressure. But in the panic zone, these people, they care about their performance. But because they feel panicked, they don't learn well or perform well. Now, let me just stop here for a second. When you apply pressure, your people move a little bit faster, you get more productivity, but a lot of managers feel real good about that. And what do? They apply more pressure. They get more productivity, they feel real good about it, and then guess what else they do? They apply more pressure. But what happens is by the time they get to the 4th squeeze, they realize they're not getting the same productivity that they got on the first squeeze, which causes them to squeeze even harder to get back to that productivity level. And now you have people working under constant pressure, and that's where the problem comes in. Because they feel panicked, they don't learn well or perform well here. Their judgment is impaired. They don't make great decisions. Burnout tends to happen during this stage. Quality of work suffers. People are pushed to indecision. People here are not confident nor competent to handle what's before them. And in many cases, they become paralyzed. In other words, they start some of everything, but they never finish anything. Now, what's really funny about this zone, not only can you have people that are working in the panic zone, in many cases, the company itself works in the panic zone, and people wonder, why do they still exist? Well, they still exist because they continue to turn over people. They bring in new people. They squeeze them. They get the best out of them, the most out of them. And then they churn them within 3 to 6 months. They bring on more people. They squeeze them. They get the best out of them. They get more productivity. And then 3 or 6 months, they have a new staff, and that cycle repeats itself over and over and over again. But the company never develops any real stability. And it's very difficult to elevate people in that environment. Guys, those are 3 zones that can be very detrimental to the work environment. 2 of them are fixable. Let's talk about the very last zone. Hey guys, this is the only zone that works. It's called the stretch zone. In the stretch zone, it's a good place to live and work. Your people are actively involved in their work. In other words, they enjoy doing the work. They're committed to developing themselves because of your leadership and the growth that they've experienced under your leadership. They start developing themselves. They're looking to change in a major way. They're always looking to do things differently. People in this zone are not threatened by change. They believe they control their destiny by their actions and their approach. And people in the stretch zone understand they have blind spots. In other words, they know that they're not perfect, but they're always willing to be coached, even though they're the ones that we consider to be the best employees. It is important to know that people learn best when they're in this zone. The way that you get folks into this zone is by putting them in a consistent training program, holding them accountable, motivating them on a consistent and regular basis, and making sure that they're well coached. Here's one of the things I want you to do. I want you to go back and ask your team members, do they enjoy their jobs? Ask them that question. No, don't ask them that question. I'm just messing with you. Don't do that. They're going to lie to you. They're going to say, I enjoy my job. Don't ask that question. Ask them this question. Tell me 3 things that you enjoy about your job. Ask them that question. You'll more likely get the truth. You get a chance to do something that's very cool by asking that question. You get a chance to evaluate what percentage of their day that they're doing those 3 things. And if they give you those 3 things and you come to the determination that's only 15% of their day, that means the other 85% they don't necessarily enjoy. But if you're that leader that has the capability and the authority to increase the things that they like to do by another 15%, which means they enjoy 30% of their day, you just made a drastic change in their environment. That's a fact. Guys, I'm going to leave you with one thought here. I want you guys to think about, how do your people view you as a manager? My coach, who is John Maxwell, has a book called The 5 Levels of Leadership. I call them the 5 lenses of leadership. This is a great exercise for you, and take some time today to do this. Think about how every one of your employees actually see you. The first lens that they're looking through is called the positional lens. When your folks are looking at you through this lens, it means that you lead by your position. You lead by your title. And the only reason that they follow you is because they have to. That is the only way that they can get paid. Lens number 2 is called the connectivity lens. When they're looking at you through this lens, it means that you've taken the time to listen, learn, and observe your employees. And through doing that, you've established a relationship with your employees. Now they don't follow you because they have to. Now they follow you because they want to. That's another level of fellowship. Lens number 3 is called the productivity lens. When they're looking at you through this lens, they've identified that through your efforts, you have a profound effect on the company's bottom line. This is where the respect starts to build between you and your employees. Lens number 4 is called the identifier lens. when your folks are looking through this lens, they've identified that you have the ability to uncover their untapped potential. Untapped potential is the one thing that allows an employee to bring undeniable value to the organization. And lens number 5 is called the pinnacle lens. When they're looking through this lens, your people just do for you because of who you are and all that you've done for them. Most of us will never get to that lens, but that's what we're striving for every single day. The antidote to corporate dysfunction is effective and great leadership. And in order to be great at what you do as a leader, you have to consistently expand your leadership capacity. And it requires that you study leadership. I want to thank Stretch for inviting me. And I really enjoyed giving the presentation. If you guys have any questions for me, I look forward to them.
Thank you, Shawn. Really inspiring. I mean, well fitting to the Stretch conference, right? We kind of started it because of this, right? Getting those people to really just keep in that stretch zone and keep it there. Really cool stuff. So we do have a couple of questions already, and I just want to encourage the audience. We have the stage chat that you can go in and type in your questions. I'm going to be reading some. We already have one, which is really interesting. It's, if someone does not want to be saved, is it ethical to dismiss him or her for the sake of the company's efficiency?
Well, absolutely. If someone doesn't want to be saved, you have to take a look at the other employees. If you know that that person is not supposed to be there, the other employees also know that they shouldn't be there. So now it makes your job harder to coach, train, motivate, or discipline the other employees because of that person. What it is, you're allowing that person to be the standard for the team environment. That is the very reason why that person has to be removed. And it's a tough decision, but it's a decision that has to be made.
I agree. I've been in that tough decision, and it's not easy, especially when you want to save those people, right? You're tempted to save them, but it's identifying them that they're in that space and helping them out of that, I think, is a win-win here for both parties.
May I just say one more word on that?
Yes.
When you don't make the right decisions within your team environment, when the team members know that you're harboring someone that shouldn't be there, you allow gossip to happen within the team environment. I can promise you that your other team members are having this discussion amongst themselves because that person exists. So we got to be very careful of the decisions that we make, and we make the right decisions.
Perfect. So we have another question on how do you explore people's blind spots? How do you help them identify them? How do you explore that?
Well, this is very important, and most companies have gotten away from this. There should be a formal 30-minute coaching session every 2 weeks where you're going through the employee's performance and their behaviors during that time frame. When you're having a 2-week session with your people, it allows you to catch things early. So what happens is that there are little small things that are happening with our employees all the time that are going against policy, rules, and regulations, but many times we tend to overlook them because they're small. But when you're not having those coaching sessions on a regular basis, small things over a period of time do what? They turn into big things. And then when they become highly noticeable, then you want to address it. But the problem is when you address it at that point, then that feedback is considered to be negative feedback because over the past 3 or 4 months that you didn't address it, you told them by not saying anything that that's acceptable behavior. If you allow an employee to do something 4 times without saying anything that's against policy, it becomes a policy for the employee. So you have to do this every 2 weeks to make sure that those small things that they're struggling with, you're able to identify them in a very quick manner.
Yeah, be careful with those norms, right? Because that's what happens, right? When you allow this to build over time, it becomes the norm of the team. It starts influencing them in a negative manner. Um, so to switch it up a bit, somebody's asking, like, what are your favorite books on leadership?
The 5 levels of leadership is one. 15 laws of invaluable growth is another. The third one would be many communicate, but very few connect. Those are 3 powerful books. And I tell you, if you read those books and you take on the best practices that are in those books, it will certainly improve your ability to lead people.
Thank you for sharing. Going back to the zones, somebody's asking, how can you help your team get out of the panic zone? I've experienced this myself, so I know it's hard to just get out of that, right? So how can you help somebody, as you as your manager, just get out of that whole panic zone?
Sometimes it can be very difficult because of the way that you're being led as a manager. When leadership is leading in the panic zone, it makes it very difficult for you not to lead in the panic zone. And the only thing that I can tell you is to follow the 4 things that we talked about, that we discussed today. Have a training plan for your people throughout the course of every year. It's important. If you can train your people to be above the learning curve, or 3 or 5 years above the learning curve or the business curve. In other words, not only do they know their jobs at 100%, this is very important. We should know what it is that our people don't know about their job. The reason that people are in the panic zone, or companies are in the panic zone, is because most of the employees there, they don't understand their job from A to Z, and therefore they're not efficient. And so because they're not efficient, they're not getting the right amount of productivity. And now we're squeezing people, right, trying to get more productivity, when the fact of the matter is the cause of the problem has never been addressed. Training is a big, fundamental best practice that you need to demonstrate in this particular situation, and ongoing coaching. The accountability piece is also important, because when you identify their blind spots, you have to hold them accountable for making the appropriate change. And collaborative solutions between you and your employee to fix those blind spots are really important. Know what it is that your people don't know, and then build a plan for them to know those things. That will help get out of the panic zone.
Perfect. So I think we have one more question, or time for one more question. Do people have hard limits? If yes, how do you realize that they cannot be stretched any longer?
Do they have hard limits? Well, there's a couple gaps that we all have to look at as leaders to identify that. Number one, there's a knowledge gap. How much knowledge capacity do they have as it pertains to their job? There's a skills gap that you have to take a look at. Do they have the necessary skills to perform this job at the highest level? There's an inspiration gap. Sometimes the knowledge is there, the skill is there, but they're not inspired to do the job at a high level. In other words, they're not motivated. That's a gap that you have to fill. Every manager has a responsibility to motivate their employees, but sometimes we don't have time to do that, which means we have to build an environment for your employees so that your employees can motivate themselves, which means that along with your HR departments, who really are not doing a great job in these days, you have to remove all of the demotivators that exists in your environment. And what are demotivators? I mean, there's a lot. I had one company that I was working with. One of the employees says, we've had 2 major layoffs in the past 18 months. And because of those layoffs, we were overworked and overloaded. That's a demotivator. Right? Public shaming is a demotivator. Not getting yearly evaluations is a demotivator. Not getting a raise in 3, 4, 5 years is a demotivator. So you have to remove the demotivators from the environment as well. Those are just some good tips.
Super, yeah, and I really resonate, especially like connecting those dots for people is really important, because sometimes you're just too focused in things, and the manager can really just zoom out and kind of connect point A to point B. and just kind of show that way to how to get there. So just like that simple conversation, connecting those two dots are really powerful. So I will mention there's going to be a Q&A session. So people, if they didn't get answered their questions or they want to ask more questions, you'll find on the sessions side of Hopin. You can jump right after we finish with the stage. I want to say thanks to Shawn. And Shawn, we're going to be sharing you, I'm going to be sending you this little mug here with your picture on it. It's a stretch mug as a little keepsake for you. We'll be sending it by post.